right, so I have my rest installed. I got my D-loop, my nocking point. The next step for me would be to shoot this bow. So typically I'll shoot, 25, 50 arrows through it just to kind of put some reps through the strings. Strings don't typically move a bunch, but before I put my peep in, I do like to shoot some arrows through it just to make sure it's kind of settled. After that, my step would be to install the peep sight. And in order to do that, I need a little help. So I'm gonna ask Neville to jump over here and help me. But essentially what I'm gonna do is come to full draw, anchor in, and I'm just gonna have him mark the string with a Sharpie, approximately where my eye level is. That'll give me a good starting point in order to pop my peep in. And then from there, I can fine tune it. So that's the next step. I'm just gonna put my peep in. Neville, do you wanna jump over here and give me a hand? So just mark it as like, eye line, essentially straight through where you think. So that's a good reference point. I may end up moving it a little bit up or down, but it is a good reference just to start. So the next step is just to put it back in the press. Once I get the bow in the press, I'm gonna press it. I've got a Hamskea Raptor peep, which we sell here in the goHUNT gear shop. It's a great peep. Neville really likes them. They cut down on the glare, especially in sunny conditions. Doesn't seem to matter if that peep doesn't come back exactly straight every time. The shape and just kind of the configuration of that peep sight really does block out sunlight. So that's a great peep for hunting. We sell those in a variety of apertures. And I think probably the one I've got is a 3/16. I think we also sell it in an 1/8 for guys that like a smaller peep. All right, so before I press the bow to put the peep in, one little tip. When you buy a new bow or if you get new strings, often they'll throw a piece of serving between the strands, and that kind of marks the middle of the string. Before you press that bow, I like to take this piece of serving and slide it up under tension to the approximate point where you think you're gonna put your peep. And something about that seems to help it kind of settle, and it does, in my opinion, helps the peep come back straight for some reason. So I don't move this around hardly ever other than just prior to putting my peep in. And like I said, I just want to move it to the spot that I'm going to end up putting my peep. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to grab my Raptor peep here. I've got the bow in the bow press. Again, before I press a bow, I just want to double check and make sure that each limb is in the groove so it's not going to pop out of the press. I'm just going to really slowly press that bow. And again, you don't have to relax that string so much, just enough to get the peep in it. I've got my piece of serving slid up to the approximate point I had Chris mark on the string, which is where I'm going to install that peep. As far as peep orientation, the way that thing faces, you're going to kind of have it facing down towards you, I guess, if you can imagine that. So the angle of this is going to kind of face down towards you so that as you draw that bow back, it will come back nice and flush so that you can see through it. These peep sights from Hamskea, they've got different grooves in it depending on the axle to axle length of the bow and your draw length. We have a little chart on our listing of this peep in the gear shop. You can also visit Hamskea's website where they have a chart, and you can compare your draw length, the axle to axle length of your bow, and you can get approximate idea of what grooves your peep sight should be using for your bow. So I know for me, these grooves that are kind of in the outside edge, I know that those are supposed to be facing down for this axle to axle length and draw length of this bow. I'm just going to pull out the piece of serving. I've got the string separated with my finger. If you are shooting the same color string, make sure you keep that serving in so that you have the exact middle of the string every single time if you have to adjust your peep or put a new peep in. Then you're just going to take the peep and put that in between the string. Once again, like I said, you want to make sure that that peep is kind of facing, down this way. If you look at that, you can kind of get an idea what that looks like. And once you've got that in there, you just want to make sure that the strands on either side of the peep are within each groove. And I'm just going to kind of make sure everything's good, and I'm just going to relax the string as I go. As I relax that string, you can see that things kind of move a little bit because you've put, a piece of equipment in your strand, so it's kind of created some, movement in your string. My D-loop, you can see it's kind of moved over a little bit. It's not a big deal. You're just going to kind of tip your D-loop back, tip your knocking point back, check your Peep, make sure it's good and everything's lined up. And then the next step for me would be to pull this bow out of the press, drop back a few times, see how it feels, see if I can see through it, and if it's comfortable for, you know, my height and you know, my setup. So that's the step I'm going to take next. After that, I'm going to show you how to tie a Peep in. I typically don't tie a Peep in immediately after I put it in. I like to shoot some arrows through it, let my string kind of settle. But in this case, I'm going to jump in here in the next few minutes and show you how to tie your Peep into your string. I'm just going to take a piece of serving. I've got this nice bright yellow piece of serving so you'll be able to see it. I like a thinner serving, so I use a different serving than I use to tie in my knock set. This is a thinner piece, like a piece of 3D or something, so it's a little bit thinner. My first step is I'm going to run the serving through the middle here. As you can see right here, I've already marked on my string reference points, so you can see where those two marks are in relation to these two grooves on the Peep sight. That's for me just to make sure that I'm going to tie that Peep in exactly where I need it. You know, I may end up moving the Peep a little bit over time, but that's always going to serve as a reference mark for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this piece of serving, I'm going to slide it up and just kind of pop it right in between in the groove. So you can see that little groove right there that you can tie your Peep in. I'm going to take the other side and kind of run it back through and do the exact same thing. I like to make sure that I've got my serving where I tie my Peep in running through. It's just like another attachment point for my serving and my Peep, just to make sure that it's going to stay in there. So I've ran my serving underneath the string here in the groove, and the next step for me is I'm going to make some knots, so just some over and unders, just like I did when I tied my knock set in. And I'm going to pull that in right here, and then I'm going to do one above and another one below. So that's kind of my first step in tying my Peep in. I don't want my Peep to move. I really want to secure it. So like I said, I want to make sure that I get some knots above and below my string, so that thing is tight. So I'll do one more below. Just like I did when I tied my knock set in, this piece of serving that I'm going to use to tie my Peep in, I'm going to coat that in a thick layer of wax so that it's tacky. So as I pull these knots in, they're not going to come apart because that serving's slick. I want it to stick. So I definitely would recommend using a little bit of wax. So you can see right there, I've got some over and unders. I've got it on the inside of the string. I've got some on the outside of the string. And the next step for me is I'm going to run one of these down each side, and I'm going to back serve them. So that as I pull those in, it's going to tighten this down around this Peep. Once I get done with this, there's no chance that this Peep's going to move. It's going to stay put where I want it. So for the next step, I'm going to take this outside piece here. I can see this strand is twisting this way with the string. So I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to run it up and over. I'm just going to make a loop right there, and I'm just going to kind of work my way up this side of the string, just making loops as I go over. So you can kind of see I'm just working towards the top here. And eventually, like I said, when I get up towards the top, I'm going to back serve these and pull this towards this Peep sight. So it's going to pinch and pull that towards the Peep. Same thing on the bottom, so it's going to pinch and pull those together. I typically do maybe 4 or 5 loops on either side. I don't want to pinch these super tight, so I'm not trying to pull those together. I like to run it up to where maybe I'm going to pull it a little bit, but not a ton. I don't need to really compress it. I don't want to have one of my strands of my string break because I've got that thing pinched too tight. So I'm just going to keep working it up, keep working these loops. I might do one more. Okay. So as I do that, I kind of space them out a little bit, get a nice even mix right here. I'm just going to pull those snug. I don't need to crank on it too bad, but I am going to pull them snug. And then my next step is I'm going to start wrapping these over. So I might make 3 or 4 loops over the entire string, just keeping tension on it. Once I've got tension on it, my next step, and there's a lot of different ways to do this. Some guys will, use serving and back serve it with a jig. This is how I do it. It's a pretty simple process. So you just take a piece of serving. It's just a regular small piece of serving. You make a loop in it. All I'm going to do is take the loop end and I'm going to lay it underneath this string. So I've got it here on top of my bowstring. I'm going to take the serving piece, the piece that I'm serving my peep in with, and I'm just going to start to make wraps around that piece of serving. So I'm going to make maybe 6 or 7 loops around this piece of serving. You can kind of see it laying there on the string. And then on my last loop, as I come over the top here, I'm going to take my loose end of my piece of serving that I'm serving my peep in. I'm going to put it through the middle of this piece that I laid on top of the string. You can see that in white. I'm going to pull that up, keep some tension on it. I'm just going to take the end pieces of my piece of serving that I laid on top of my string, keeping tension on it. I'm just going to kind of start working it back and forth. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling this piece back through. So I've essentially back served it. So you can see how that works. I've just pulled the loose end back through the tail that I went up the string. At that point, I can take this piece and kind of pull it in and build a little tension on it. I don't want to get too crazy. Ultimately, what I want to do is do this one the exact same way, going down the bottom half of the string. And then when I'm done with both of those, I want to pull them together towards each other to really cinch and pull that peep into the middle. So next step, I'm just going to finish off the bottom side here. I'm going to start wrapping it just like I did the top. So as I serve this one down the bottom side of the string, I like to count and make sure that I do the same number on both sides. So if I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on that side, I'll make sure that I do the exact same number going down the other. And I don't know that it matters a ton, probably doesn't in the grand scheme of things, but if you're a little OCD, it probably does. So I've got 7 loops in there. I'm just going to kind of pull that snug, and then again I'm going to start wrapping the main part of the string. And again I'm going to do the exact same amount of wraps that I did above as I do below. So I've got 4, 5 without. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take my piece of serving, again just a loop, piece of serving. You can see the end piece right there. And I'm just going to lay that on the string, hold it in my hand, take my serving in and just start wrapping that piece of serving underneath it. And again, that just helps me pull that back through, which is essentially just a back serve. I found this method to be pretty dang easy. You practice it a little bit, you do a bunch of them, it comes super easy. So again, I'm going to do 7 of these, I think, below. And once I've got that done, let's see, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm just going to tuck this through the end. Again, I'm just tucking it through this loop, this little piece of serving right here that I've got looped underneath. I'm going to pop the end through that. So I'm just going to take the end of my serving, stick it through that loop. Again, I'm going to pull that tight, keep a little bit of tension on it. And as you pull this end through, I like to keep tension on both. And you kind of, and then eventually I'm just going to take this entire piece, I'm going to pull that piece of serving through. So what I've done is I've just served, back served each side of the peep. Now that I've got that done on both ends, I'm just going to take each piece. What I like to do is just pull those against each other. You can, cut your fingers. Some of this serving, it'll dig into you. A lot of the time I will take, an Allen wrench, anything I've got lying around, a little tool. For example, I'll take a couple of these, I'll wrap it around and use that to pull against each other. But essentially, like I said, what you're doing is you're just pulling tension into those. You're pulling it together. So you're serving it together. So You can see how that looks and how that works. You've got both ends served back towards each other. I've got a Peep that's tied in that definitely will not move. The final step for tying your Peep in is just to take some scissors or a knife. You cut the ends off and then just take your lighter. Again, never, anytime you're using a lighter around your bowstring, you want to be very careful. You want to do it horizontally. You don't want to do it vertically because you can imagine a flame's going to burn up your string. So you want to do it horizontally with your bow on a press if you can. You're just going to take the end piece, just very slowly melt that down, and as it gets to the very end, close to that serving, just smash it into the serving. Just like that. So I've got my Peep served in, knock point, D-loop, rest set up. We're going to cruise through the rest of this bow build. We'll add some stabilizers out of sight. We'll go through the tuning process, but it's coming along really nice.